Welcome back to the Garden with Joe and Holly radio show. Moments away, Kathy Jentz. But first, Rise Gardens.
Rise Gardens is a revolutionary hydroponic gardening system for your home. Instead of food traveling hundreds or even over 1,000 miles before it hits your plate, harvest the veggies, herbs, and greens you need for dinner tonight in the comfort of your home. No green thumb required. Gardening made easy with the Rise Gardens app. Step-by-step guidance from seed to harvest, a complete garden on a shelf, and comes with everything you need to grow healthy and the freshest food for you and your loved ones. Fully customize your garden to your needs and preferences. For more information and get your Rise Garden, visit risegardens.com.
Wonderful. Holly, let's go to the hotline and bring in our guest for this week.
Kathy Jentz is an author, editor, and lifelong gardener who believes growing plants should be stress-free and enjoyable. She co-authored the Urban Gardener book with Terry Spite, and her new book is Ground Cover Revolution. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we appreciate you taking time out of your day, not only to educate Holly and myself, but all of our listeners. And I'll start with this question because I think a lot of people struggle with this. You are very passionate about gardening and making it enjoyable. Sometimes some people may not feel that way and feel very overwhelmed about gardening. What are some ways in which you can advise people to make some changes to find that enjoyment in growing plants as you do?
Yeah, I would say first, grow what you love. You know, there's no must grow list. And so whether that be ornamentals or edibles. And then secondly, I would say reduce what is making most maintenance. If it's a high maintenance lawn, then reduce the area of lawn. If it's a high maintenance vegetable garden, then maybe cut back in the vegetable garden and do more containers.
Yeah, it makes, people, I think, and maybe you've seen it like we have, it's either got to be everything or nothing at all.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to be the catch-all for these people, for new gardeners. Hey, I've got to fill the whole backyard up or it's not worth it.
Yeah, and I think it can be very overwhelming, Joey. And I think that, biting off a little bit, building one bed this year, adding one more container, and then each year adding a new project is the way to go. But I do know you get a little over enthusiastic and try to tackle everything at once. And then, you're just going to have an aching back after that.
Your backyard is not a farm. It doesn't all have to be done this week.
Exactly.
So your new book coming out is Ground Cover Revolution. Can you tell us more? So it looks like it came out recently here. Can you tell us more about it so that our readers are interested, want to pick up a copy, maybe a helpful tip that's in there or a little spoiler, if you will?
Sure, Holly. So it's all about replacing turf grass lawns where you can with ground cover choices. And that could be because you just want lower maintenance, spending less time doing your lawn, a little less expensive, or maybe environmentally, you're looking to replace turf grass lawn because you want to have wildlife benefit, or you just want something more beautiful than a plain turf grass lawn. So maybe you want something flowering or something even with berries on it. So you would ask for a little tip. One of the profiles of a ground cover I do in the book is on strawberries. And people are very surprised to hear that strawberries can be a ground cover. You've probably had wild strawberries pop up in your lawn as a weed, and they're a natural ground cover. There are native strawberries, and there are, of course, very hybrid ornamental strawberries like Pink Panda. That's a gorgeous one as a ground cover. They're great on slopes. They're great next to sidewalks, and of course, you even get some edible fruit from them.
Well, and replacing the lawn based on where you're at, you may get a tax deduction because of water. You don't have to use as much water. And just for the general sense of there's a lot of chemicals that is used to make these lawns so pristine that if people really understood, they would realize what's really going on and it's not good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fertilizers are based on chemicals, a lot of them. And so you don't have to have those additives. You don't have to be watering when it's not raining, all the time. And of course, you don't have to mow once or twice a week. in the high season, most of the ground covers that I talk about in the book are either a once a year mow back, or cutting back with a weed whacker, or just letting them die back and then they spring back on their own in the springtime.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, and I don't know if this is true or not, and maybe you can confirm, a lot of the grasses that we have growing in our yards are not necessarily native, and or they are invasive. Is that correct?
Correct. So most of them, depending on if it's a cool or warm season grass and where you're living, there is a native buffalo grass, but there's very few native grasses in the Americas that you're using for that. But one of the things I recommend in the book as a substitute that looks very grass-like and is native are some of the Carexes. So you can have like the Pennsylvania sedge, the Carex pennsylvanica, or the wood sedge, which is the Carex woodii, and they look and perform just like a turf grass, but they're tougher and they're actually deer resistant.
Good to know.
So you have another book that you wrote about a year ago, and I find this book highly informative, especially for urban gardeners. It's the Urban Garden 100 Ways to Grow Food and Beauty in the City. Can you share something about that book that would also pique our listeners' interest?
Sure. So we're just coming up on our first anniversary of that book's release. And Terry and I are so happy about the success and the reception that people have had for the book, because there's lots of ideas that you can apply to any small space gardening. And I hear a lot of feedback from readers of it that even if they had like 10 acres of garden, there's still ideas they can apply. So we talk about ways to increase your space, maximize your yield if you're doing food gardening, and also ways to bring in beauty if it's not such a pretty place. You know, if you have like a view from your balcony or somewhere that you want to disguise, we talk about ways to deal with that and ways to increase privacy. So like if you're in a townhouse or you're in a condo or an apartment and you have neighbors that can look straight into your garden, we talk about ways for increasing privacy and the beauty of your surroundings.
Well, let's tie that in. You know, many people think that gardening is extremely costly. What are some of your favorite budget-friendly tips to keep costs down? And I know that, you know, gardening is a hobby and there's a certain amount of expense that has to be endured, but some people think, you know, they go overboard and they think they got to have everything, the best of the best. What are some ways that you've found to be more cost-effective but still have really good results?
Well, Joey, you're asking the right person, because I live a very frugal and green lifestyle, and I love to pinch a penny. So one of my favorite things is when you join a local garden club or plant society is that a lot of them have plant swaps, and that's a great way to get a lot of free plants, especially when you're starting off. And it's usually when you get to about your 10th year as a gardener, right? That when you have a full garden, you're in the phase of giving away plants. Right. Usually making friends with other gardeners or experienced gardeners, you can get a lot of free plants that way. And even on like your local Buy Nothing Facebook groups, you know, anything like that, you could just put out I need a ground cover to fill in such and such a spot. And it's always surprising how many people have extra plants and are very generous. I find gardeners in general, Joey and Holly, to be a very generous type of people.
Now, is there anything that you need to be aware of if you're going to get free plants that you see online? Is there any certain questions that you should be asking before you just bring it home and plop it in the ground in your yard?
Yeah, I would say there's always a reason people are giving away excess plants, and that might be your warning. If this is a fast spreader, or you might ask them where it does best. And maybe if it's a fast spreader, say like Lily of the Valley, and it could take over a bed in a sunny, well-draining place, that maybe you put it in part sun, you kind of keep it in check a little bit that way. You might ask about the soil too. You don't want to spread things like jumping worms or some other type of disease issue. But in general, sometimes I'll keep a pot aside. If I don't know the person or I don't know the gardener, I'll keep it in a pot for a couple of months and keep an eye on it to make sure nothing has come along with the plant that I wasn't bargaining for.
Absolutely. So, in your book, the Urban Garden book, it mentions something called a salad table. This might be a good option for gardeners who don't have a lot of space or want to grow maybe grow something additionally to their big garden. Tell us more about the salad table.
Yeah, that's such a fun project. It's basically a raised bed, but on stilts. So you can have it at your waist height or a little bit higher. So great for adaptability and accessibility. And it keeps it out of the rabbit range, right? So
Right.
might be in range for deer, but it keeps it out of the rodents and rabbits down on the ground, and it keeps it easy for you because you don't have to bend over at all. So basically, you're creating a box and putting like hardware cloth or landscape fabric on the bottom, and you're growing shallow plants in general. So usually lettuce greens, some herbs. You could do the strawberries I mentioned earlier. And you can move it. That's another great thing about containers and salad table in general is you can put some wheels on it, or you can have somebody help you. So if it's like a hot, humid summer and you want to move it to a little more shade and get a couple more weeks out of those greens, or you could just throw a shade cloth over the whole thing too.
Well, Kathy, we greatly appreciate the time you've offered us and our listeners. How can people find out more about you and get your books?
Sure, they can follow me on Instagram or Twitter or Pinterest at WDC Gardener. So all one word, WDC Gardener. And my website is washingtongardener.blogspot.com. They can find me on Facebook under my name or the magazine's name. And the books are available on Amazon, bookshop.org, from local bookstores and public garden gift shops near them. They can just look for my name, Kathy with a K, and last name Jentz.
Well, Kathy, thank you very much for your time and the knowledge you've shared with us.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And
For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.